Welcome back in, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. We've been talking about what I think is just a scary situation, but also a sign of what can happen when you begin to reverse progress. When you go from, as Congressman Tom McClintock points out, driving down in a massive way the amount of wildfire acres that are being consumed in California. And then you start to reverse all the policies that had helped to make that such a huge success. And we're joined now by the author of that Wall Street Journal editorial, Congressman Tom McClintock from the 5th Congressional District in California. Congressman McClintock, appreciate you coming on with us. Great piece this morning. How frustrating is it to look at the data and do a deep dive on what's been going on with California wildfires? As you lay out, this is a historical reality. 4.5 million on average acres a year have burned since the 1500s in California. Due to smart policies, that number gets driven back down to 250,000. And then as you lay out, new decisions are made that reverse many of those successful policies. And here we are, California can't put out a fire, and there are a lot more of them than there used to be.
Well, exactly right. Fire is how nature gardens, and nature's a lousy gardener. If you doubt that for a second, just leave your own alone for a few years and tell me what it's going to look like. Nature removes excess growth by catastrophic fire. Beginning in the 20th century, we adopted policies to do the gardening ourselves. We auctioned off excess timber to logging companies who actually paid us to remove the excess. We leased public lands to cattle and sheep ranchers to suppress brush growth through grazing. In the Santa Monica Mountains above Malibu, I remember as a kid, Basque sheep herders used to graze tens of thousands of heads of sheep every year to keep the brush under control. We used herbicides to keep brush from residential areas. We put out fires before they could explode out of control. And as you pointed out, fire losses went from the historic average of about 4.5 million acres in California to a fairly steady 250,000 acres. But then we adopted these leftist environmental laws in the 1970s that have made permitting for these practices endlessly time-consuming, ultimately cost-prohibitive, and so not a lot of it gets done. We still had fires in those days, but they were a fraction of the intensity that we see today. And now what we're seeing is not a new normal. We're simply seeing the old normal return. In 2020, we were back up to about 4.5 million acres destroyed by fire. And that is a choice that we made when we adopted laws that have made it impossible to manage our lands.
How frustrating is that to not only you, but other Californians who have lived through the process of, boy, we're making really good decisions when it comes to limiting these wildfires. And then this is often, as you know, much of this is circular. You start to have that success and people say, well, maybe we don't need to do this anymore. And the environmentalists and the climate change people make these changes. And now they're arguing, and I'm sure you're already seeing this, well, this is a natural consequence of climate change as opposed to a natural consequence of many of the choices that they made in an effort to try to combat climate change.
Well, here's the problem with their argument. As you referenced, when Juan Cabrillo dropped anchor in San Pedro Bay, it was the autumn of 1542. That's the height of the Santa Ana fire season. He promptly named it the Bay of Smoke. So, fires fanned by these seasonal Santa Ana winds are nothing new. And by the way, when Juan Cabrillo observed those fires off the coast of California in 1542, it was the height of a little ice age when temperatures were at their lowest in 10,000 years. And it also doesn't explain this. You can literally go up in a helicopter and you can often tell the difference between the public lands that are subject to these environmental laws and the private lands that are not, just by the condition of the forests on each side of the line. So we have to ask ourselves, how clever are the climate to know the exact boundary lines between the public and private lands and only decimate the public ones?
So What is the solution here in your mind? I mean, and how frustrating is it that, well, let me go back to the solution because I think you'll get to that, but how frustrating is it that basically the government of Los Angeles and certainly the state government of California, we're talking about the fifth largest economy in the world, and that they not only have lost the ability to help prevent these fires based on public policy decisions, but also lost the ability to even put the fires out. I would argue, Congressman, that maybe the number one goal and responsibility of any government on its most basic level is when people's homes are burning, we should be able to put them out. California can't even do that, Los Angeles area right now.
Yes, well, who was it that said, when Dr. Johnson said, when a man is to be hanged in the morning, it focuses his attention remarkably. Well, maybe this is something that will focus the attention of the people of California on the people they've been electing now for 40 or 50 years. And by the way, it's not just California. Some of the worst of these environmental laws are federal that were imposed in the 1970s. But it comes down to a simple question that elections matter because they determine public policy, and public policy matters because that determines our fundamental safety and quality of life as human beings.
So what's the solution? In your mind, let's pretend that Californians actually made a good decision. And I loved your piece in the Wall Street Journal, and I thank the Wall Street Journal for publishing it, you for writing it. What would you do looking forward? Okay, we have to try to limit the amount of wildfires. You're never going to completely eliminate them because, as you mentioned, this is a natural condition of Southern California from time immemorial, or at least since we've had recorded history of the LA area from a European perspective. What should happen if you were given a magic wand and they said, you're in charge of fixing this and trying to limit this going forward? What's the right solution?
This is not a theoretical discussion because we already know what works. We practiced it for much of the 20th century. Every year we would send out foresters to the national forest. They would mark off excess timber, and then we would auction that timber off to logging companies to remove. They would pay us to remove it. Same thing with leasing public lands. The BLM right now leases most of its public lands across the country for about $1.50 a head for cattle. In California, it's $25. So obviously, nobody leases land for grazing. So you have this huge buildup of brush. All of that excess brush and all of that excess timber is going to come out one way or the other. We're either going to carry it out or nature's going to burn it out. So, go back to the policies that worked. Scientific management of the forests worked. Remove the excess growth before it can choke off the forest or before it can build up as brush. When nature comes to burn it out. That's the fundamental issue in all of this is scientific management of the lands. We consigned our lands to a condition of benign neglect because the environmental left promised that would improve the forest and brushland environment. Well, I think we're entitled to ask now, after 50 years of experience with these laws, how are they working? And the answer is damning. It's going up in smoke all around us. We've lost about a quarter of our national forests to catastrophic fire in the last 10 years. That's the effect of these new environmental policies. And what we found out is that benign neglect is not so benign.
How frustrating is it as a Californian? I don't know if you heard any of the first hour of the program, but I've spent a lot of time in California. I mean, there's a strong argument that California is America's Garden of Eden. You just laid out. We're not trying to do anything that hasn't worked before. It's not like you're coming out and saying, hey, we need to take some radical moves to try and adjust this. California made a lot of great decisions. It's why the state grew and flourished into the fifth largest economy in the world. It now feels to me, and I'm curious if you feel this on the ground, like all of that incredible wealth and all of those good decisions are now being left behind in favor of radical anti-growth and, frankly, destructive policies for many of the people living there. For someone like you, how incredibly frustrating is that?
Well, it's not just frustrating. It's heartbreaking. You look at California, we have the most equitable climate in the entire Western Hemisphere. We have the most bountiful natural resources anywhere in the continental United States. We're poised on the Pacific Rim in a position to dominate a world trade for the next century. And yet, if you look at the census data, you will find that there is a unprecedented exodus of Californians leaving the state. And one of the two of the most popular destinations are Nevada and Arizona. Now, I cannot imagine an act of God that could do so much damage to this beautiful state as to cause people to find a better place to live and work and raise their families out in the middle of the Nevada nuclear test range. No act of God can do that I can think of, but acts of government can do that much damage, and they have. And so now people are voting with their feet and leaving this beautiful state. And the only thing that's changed in this state is public policy. And the good news is we can't control acts of God. But acts of government, we can change the moment we summon the political will to do so. So far, we haven't summoned that will, but maybe this is a catalyst to get people to start rethinking their whole worldview about the people they've been electing in California for the past 50 years. And hopefully it's a wake-up call to the federal government as well to begin changing some of these federal policies that have contributed to this disaster.
We're talking to Congressman Tom McClintock. Last question for you, Congressman. I get a lot of questions, and we had a caller just at the end of the last hour about California's failure to capture much of the rain that actually falls in California, particularly Southern California. I've spent a lot of time there. Anybody who has, when the rain comes, and it doesn't come in a consistent fashion, it often arrives all of a sudden. You can stand and watch all of this bounteous fresh water just roaring right out into the Pacific Ocean, never claimed. How does that get fixed, and how has that been allowed to continue to occur?
Well, I served on the Water and Power Subcommittee as chairman for several years, and what I learned in those years is droughts are nature's fault. They happen. But water shortages are our fault. Water shortages are a choice we made when we adopted the same environmental laws that have made the management of our public lands all but impossible. They've also made the construction of new dams and reservoirs all but impossible. California, just precipitation alone produces about 4,500 gallons of fresh water every day for every man, woman, and child in the state. The problem is it's unevenly distributed over time and distance. We used to build dams to store water from wet years to move it to dry years. We used to build aqueducts to move water from wet regions to dry regions. That same environmental left movement destroyed our ability to do that. So we haven't constructed a major dam over 1 million acre feet in California since 1979, while the population's more than doubled. So it all comes back to a choice that we have made through the policies that we've enacted by the people we have elected.
Congressman, fantastic editorial. I appreciate you coming on and talking with all of our audience that has been so frustrated by so much of what you've laid out. We need to get you on again, but appreciate you fighting the right battle. And hopefully public policy, as you said, can be corrected in California, because it wasn't very long ago when the state was making a lot of great decisions.
Yes, exactly right. And someday it will again, I pray.
Congressman Tom McClintock from the 5th Congressional District in California. We appreciate the time. I shared that editorial. Encourage all of you to go read it. Fantastic this morning in the Wall Street Journal. Look, you can switch your cell phone service to Pure Talk right now from your current cell phone service and save as much as $1,000 a year. Same quality 5G nationwide service, because Pure Talk is on the same towers and network as one of the big wireless companies. The only difference is you don't have to pay anywhere near as much. In fact, you don't have to spend anywhere near those $100+ bills. You can spend $35 a month with Pure Talk. Get unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of data with a mobile hotspot. A family of 4 can save $1,000 a year with Pure Talk, and you can do it at the end of the year. That's an extra $1,000 in your pocket. It's easy to switch. All you have to do is dial pound 250, say the keywords Clay and Buck. Again, from your cell phone, dial pound 250, say Clay and Buck. You'll save an additional 50% off your first month with Pure Talk, America's wireless company. That's pound 250. Do it today.